Sofia Coppola's 2023 biopic, Priscilla, tells the story of Elvis and Priscilla Presley from Priscilla's perspective. And it doesn't hide the fact that he was 24 and she was just 14 when they met. Elvis Presley and Priscilla Beaulieu were first introduced at a party in West Germany in 1959, where he was stationed with the U.S. Army and where Priscilla's enlisted stepfather had been transferred. In that first meeting, Elvis sang "Are You Lonesome Tonight" for Priscilla. And despite the fact she was just barely a teenager, they began spending more and more time together. They would not, however, take their physical relationship further until they married. Remembering those days, Priscilla later wrote, "Elvis was handsomer than he appeared in films, younger and more vulnerable looking with his GI haircut. But Elvis told a friend, 'Priscilla is young enough that I can train her any way I want.'" Priscilla's parents were naturally concerned when their teenage daughter struck up a romance with a much older, massively famous celebrity.
You got women throwing themselves at you. Why my daughter?
Well, sir, I happen to be very fond of your daughter.
Remembering that time, she wrote, "Whenever they tried to stop us from seeing each other, I pleaded and cried and made them and myself miserable. In retrospect, I don't think anything could have stopped me from seeing Elvis." By 1960, however, Elvis had returned to the US, while Priscilla stayed behind in Germany. When he didn't contact her for a while, a heartbroken Priscilla assumed their romance had been nothing but a fling in his eyes.
What about boys at school?
Must be some handsome ones.
Eventually, Elvis got in touch, and by 1963, Priscilla, who was still in high school, joined him in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis convinced her stepfather, who was still stationed in Germany, to give them his blessing by promising to make sure she finished school. Priscilla later wrote, "Declaring his intentions honorable, he swore that he loved and needed and respected me. In fact, he couldn't live without me," he said, intimating that one day we'd marry. In that light, there was little my parents could do but say yes, and eventually they did. Elvis and Priscilla Presley married in Las Vegas in 1967. The couple's only daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, was born 9 months later. Looking back on their relationship, Priscilla said Elvis molded her, writing, "Something in his Southern upbringing had taught him that the right girl was to be saved for marriage. I was that girl. At the same time, he molded me into his woman. I wore the clothes, hairstyle, and makeup of his careful choosing."
Black hair, and more eye makeup.
But this dynamic wasn't without complications. When Priscilla asked Elvis if she could visit one of his film sets and meet his co-star, it set him off. He accused her of being aggressive and demanding, and soon the disagreement became an all-out fight. Elvis began throwing her clothes out of her closet, but after leaving Priscilla alone and humiliated for a moment, he came back and hugged her, and the pair made up. As Priscilla remembered, "I was relieved and happy to be back in his arms. Anything he'd have said would have made sense to me in that moment." This was Elvis's technique of keeping me under control. Although their marriage ended in 1973, Priscilla remained a major part of Elvis's life until his death at the age of 42. Recalling the time in her life when she was sometimes referred to as Elvis's live-in Lolita, Priscilla said, "It was a different time. I lived in his world. I wanted to please him. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to have fun with him. I wanted to see what it was that he liked."
You lived his life. You honestly didn't have your own life. You lived his life.
At the Venice Film Festival premiere of Sofia Coppola's film Priscilla, Elvis's former wife had more to say on the subject, recalling, "You know, people think, oh, it was sex. Elvis was very kind, very soft, very loving. But he also respected the fact that I was only 14 years old. We were more in mind and thought, and that was our relationship."